On today's Try to Finish Something, you've heard the when it rains, it pours. Of course, it's really sunny and warm here in California, but the saying still goes the same. I still don't have a job. I am still looking for a job, and it's not going well. I've got a water heater that's leaking. I've got my wife's car that just had a bunch of repairs. And in my car, when we went to pick up my oldest daughter from a high school drama performance that she had, I've got a car full of groceries. I've got my youngest daughter and my wife all in the car, and I went to take it out of park. It has that shifter in between the seats that you press that button in, and you use that button to depress it and then put it in to drive. I reached down and the button was already pressed in, and it wouldn't unpress in. It was stuck in the pressed in position, and I read a bunch of stuff online, and I guess this is a common issue with this. It's like a $2,000 fix. It's a big deal. I had to get my car towed, and because of all the COVID stuff, I couldn't even ride with the tow truck driver. It's a whole mess. But I am still going on job interviews. Here's another, I'm sharing way too much. I had a job interview the other day that, the gentleman that wanted to meet with me said, hey, let's meet at Starbucks. So we went to the coffee shop to have a coffee. I don't drink a ton of coffee. I do drink a lot of soda, but I don't drink a ton of coffee. And he wanted to meet at a coffee shop. And the only reason that I bring this up is because I don't know what I had eaten the night before. Things don't usually affect me, but my stomach was just making a ton of noise. There's that whole... It sounded like some sort of alien being trapped inside of my intestines, and coffee didn't really help. So of course I order a coffee because I'm drinking coffee with a guy who ordered a coffee, and so I'm like, yeah, I'll have a coffee, I'll take this. And luckily they were cleaning a fountain right beside me, and they were doing a lot of vacuuming and scrubbing, so the sounds that were coming out were super loud. I don't know what's going to happen with that. We'll see. I have no idea. I do have a build that I want to get to today. I did build a Boba Fett blaster, link up there, and I found a really cool Hasbro blaster, an old Hasbro Boba Fett blaster on eBay that was missing the stock. And it's the kind that you pull the trigger and the barrel lights up and it has sound effects, and I thought, oh, this would be pretty badass if I could redo this. And Andy Meyer makes some really amazing Boba Fett blasters. He has worked in the special effects industry and had a chance to get his hands on some real items that he casts and sells and puts together super realistic Boba Fett blasters. Here's what they look like. I mean, look at these things. These are awesome. I'll put a link in the bio for how you can find Andy Meyer and get a hold of one of these blasters yourself. But I contacted him and said, hey, here's what I want to do. Super friendly guy, super helpful, and I got some different pieces from him, and I'm going to try and mod this blaster, and there's absolutely no way that I'm going to finish this mod all in one episode. But I'm going to get to modding this Hasbro Boba Fett blaster. And that's what I'm going to do on today's Try to Finish Something. So here it is, the EE-3 Hasbro Boba Fett Blaster Rifle. The tunes you are listening to are by Trevor Hewitt. He is SaxTrev on YouTube, and he made this song just for me. Now, this blaster rifle I got almost 6 months ago on eBay, and I give you that timeline so that no one's sitting there thinking, this guy doesn't have a job, and he keeps buying stupid toys, and he should maybe focus on getting a job, and maybe his family. Anyway, this toy blaster lights up and it makes really fun noises, so it was definitely worth the purchase. I did get it for a pretty good price since it was missing the back stock. So I contacted a guy by the name of Andy Meyer, and I bought a few items from the kits that he sells. The resin stock, the D-ring handle, scope, and a few greeblies. Ooh, and the grip. Now, I just need to figure out how to make this all work together. Taking this thing apart is not super easy. It's mostly screws that hold this thing together, but there are a few parts that seem to be glued on.
Removing the glued parts is hard. I'm trying to find the part where the glue seals to this blaster. I'm just trying to figure out how to get this whole thing apart. I'm even trying a few different solvents to see if it allows the glue to dissolve a little bit, allowing me to release some of these parts. One of these little tabs on the back releases okay with the solvent, but I'm just going to saw through the other tab, and I will saw off the tip. I'll just reattach it later with glue. Ooh, and I'm going to saw off the barrel part of the scope too. I want to leave those little plastic tabs because I think I can use those to attach the new realistic scope too. Now it's time to take apart the electronics and make sure, most importantly, that I can put it all back together again. That's the only time when filming what you're doing really comes in handy, because I'm sure I will be watching this back to see how I took it apart in the first place. All right, I think I've got it, but I'm going to take it outside and give it a premature base of black. I just like to see what it starts to look like. So this D-ring part of the handle has a little clip in the top, and I need to sand both halves of the Hasbro blaster down enough so that I can fit that into the notch. And I'm also going to need to sand down the injected plastic parts of the grips of the Hasbro blaster, because I need it flat so that one half sits up against the D-ring, and the other half I'll be able to put my new grip onto. And I have to get the profile to match up on the edge of the grip too, either the front or the back. This all has to line up when I'm done. And I'm going to have a pass-through point for the bolt. The D-ring has a recessed hole for the head of the screw, and the back of the grip is threaded. So what I'm hoping to do is just really tighten this down and sandwich it all together. A Boba Blaster sandwich. Now, before I try and add a little bit of strength to this, I'm going to sand the sides of the tabs that I'm going to try and secure the scope to later. And with all this sanding, I've made the plastic so thin that I'm going to try and see if I can bend some pretty heavy gauge wire, zigzag it around in the handle and then into the body to just offer a bit more support once this is all together. Now to sand off all of the raised letters on the blaster, and I'm going to add a little bit of Bondo just to smooth out that recessed part by the barrel end. Now, the Return of the Jedi EE-3 does have this part where it's missing the rails, so it just needs to be smooth. Just trying to figure out how I'm going to attach this scope. I think it's going to work. It's all adjustable, so it should be. Do a little bit of sanding on my Bondo, and I just realized I should paint the aluminum parts of the scope and should probably give another base coat to this, because I like to paint. I'm just painting everything with a black primer base. Then what I'm going to do is base the rifle stock in a pale tan. It's the same Sahara Beige Montana Gold spray paint that I used for my Shore Trooper. And here are all of my painted pieces. The stock has a bit of texture that was baked into the mold, but I'm going to add some more grain with a technique I learned watching a Wesley treat video. I will link that in the description too, but I'm going to show you what my plan is on this pink piece of styrene that I painted with the same Montana Gold. This is just a dark wood stain. I also have a bit of a lighter stain that I'm going to try. I'll try both, but you just use a chip brush, get a little bit of the stain on the surface, and since the stain can't absorb into the surface, it streaks, and all of those streaks become the grain. You can also twist the chip brush here and there in a few places and make knots and other imperfections that you would see in real wood grain. All right, let me try the lighter stain. It's a bit too reddish yellow for what I'm going for. Never mind. Reddish yellow is orange. I don't know why I didn't just say orange. Anyway, I'm going to try and dab off some here and maybe combine them. Nah, that's not really any different. It's time to just go for it, and I'm a little bit nervous. I'm planning on applying this with a chip brush. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a very wide brush so that the grain goes all the way from end to end. I'm also just going to dab off the stain in a few places so that it gives me lighter spots and variation to the coloration. And I'll dry that a little bit. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to darken up some of the parts with some watered down water-based oils and feather that into the grain to create some different tones. I will also use a thin brush to paint on some darker grain variations and feather those out as well. And I realize I am just over-obsessing because in the end, I'm going to put a dark wash on this and most of this will never be seen, except for those of you watching now. Oh well, that's just kind of who I am. I'm just going to darken the edges where hands would always be touching and dirtying the wood, and I'm going to paint in a few dark spots where I will eventually put knots. Yes, and I'm taking it to another level. I'm going to use my Dremel, and I'm going to add some grooves and elevation changes where the knots are painted just to give them a little bit more depth. And then more paint. And once that side is dry, I'm going to flip it over and do it all over again. All right, we can just speed through this side. You know the obsessive detail that I'm going through. All right, let's get the electronics back into this thing. Notice I keep testing it out. Yes, I don't trust myself. And I keep looking at my watch because I've really got to speed this along. I'm not even supposed to be painting this because Odin of Odin Makes is waiting for me because, yes, I didn't do a video last week, and now I'm doing 2 videos at the same time, and I've got to wrap this up, but I just like to see it with some paint on it. Okay, it's time to get the grip and the D-ring sandwich to work out, and let's get this scope on. Yeah. I need to paint the battery cover. Forgot about the battery cover. And the grip on the Hasbro version is, of course, a bit narrower, and it's shorter than this one by Andy Meyer, so I'm going to need to try and fill that in, and I'm going to use some scrap foam. I'm going to visit Odin, so I should at least do something in foam. So here's the plan. I'm going to fill in some of the screw holes and leave some of the screws that it came with inside my yummy Bondo filling. Just like Mom used to make. But some of these, I'm going to add Allen screws and leave those exposed. I'm going to add the first dollop of Bondo. And I have no idea why I chose the word dollop. I don't think I've ever used that word in a conversation. Too late now, I'm plowing forward and adding another dollop of Bondo. I'm filling the screw holes in the barrel, and I'm going to add some Bondo to try and remake the rails on the barrel where they had drilled those out for the screws. It's probably going to take me at least 2 rounds of Bondo, dry, then Bondo again. I'm not worried about the rails being perfect and smooth because my plan is I'm going to Dremel some of the parts of the other rails to add wear and weathering so that it looks like it's been knocked around, so these rails will look just like the others that are damaged. So it doesn't matter if they're perfect. While round 1 of Bondo dries, I will grab the stock and do a few washes to darken this up. I will start with some cheap acrylic paints, black and brown with a bit of water. Cover the stock with a sponge and some brushes and dab it off with some paper towels. To get some really darkened spots, I'm going to mix up a bit of brown and black water-based oils and darken the areas, again, that would be handled more and should be darkened by wear. All right, the edges and the parts that are adjacent to the metal pieces, like the D-ring grip, I think those would be darker as well, and then just a few random other places. All right, time to sand the Bondo down with a 1200 grit and Dremel in my damage to a few parts of the other rails. All right, now I'm attaching the D-ring to the hilt with the 2 screws and then to cover the Bondo with some black paint. I really don't have time for this. I keep looking at my watch and I know that I'm supposed to be meeting Odin, but I want to see this with some paint on it. I'm going to spray some of my warm caramel on a plate and then dab it on to add some color to the black parts of the blaster that I would like to be a different type of metal that will appear rusty, because I really like the paint jobs that Andy Meyer does on the versions that he sells. Again, I'm going to put a link in my video description, and I want mine to be kind of a variation on that. And I'm starting with this light caramel. Then I will dab on a dark walnut spray paint. And the reason that I'm dabbing on spray paint as opposed to other paints is it just dries a little quicker. Now, in the edges and creases, to create a transition to the black areas, I'm going to just paint on with a brown and black water-based oils. Now, on the D-ring part, I want that to be more of a steel that's been painted black and has a few parts and edges chipped down to the silver below. All right, I am finished for now. I have modded this Hasbro EE-3 Blaster and given it a premature first run at paint because I just wanted to see what it looked like with some paint, and I'm super impatient. I will get more paint on this soon, but I'm calling the Hasbro mod finished. The painting, not so much. I really hope you enjoyed this, and if you didn't, as always, just keep it to yourself, and we'll see you next time as we try to finish something. And if you get a chance, check out SaxTrev on YouTube. He made this song that I've been using this whole video just for try to finish something. How cool is that? Thanks for watching, everybody.
Alright, so if you made it this far, I'm going to give you a sneak peek. This is the case that I'm taking over to Odin's, and it's an old Army surplus case, and I'm going to see if Odin can help me make this into a carrying case for thermal detonators. Now, these detonators aren't finished yet. These are just raw prints from Clever 3D Studio. Check them out on Etsy. I'm gonna finish these up and make these into super cool thermal detonators, but I'm gonna get Odin's help to see if we can put some in a case and make a custom carrying case for thermal detonators. Go over to Odin's channel, check that out. Hopefully I'll be there.